thread on my blog to let people deal with it, and I'm hoping that editorial page folks will respond. I have to say the racial angle caught my eye right away. I wish we hadn't had that prone figure as black. But
do we know that that was intentional?
No, we don't. I'm assuming it's an unintended consequence, because I don't think that was the message that the cartoonist was trying to convey, but I haven't talked to him, so I don't know. And I'm hoping that that's one of the things the editorial page people will get at. In matters of race, particularly in editorial cartoons, some level of caution is always appropriate. And this may be one where...
Perhaps he was just looking for a contrast and color. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Was that in some way depicting a scene from a real fight?
It's a takeoff of a Muhammad Ali pose from Thrilla in Manila, where he's standing over, is it Foreman or Frazier? Frazier. Gary, you might just pull that down and pass it around. Not everybody will have spotted it. It's in a odder position than normal. Now Noah lives in North Idaho, and he does local issues cartoons for us periodically. We run them a couple times a week. But I'll leave it to Doug to find out what he was thinking. It's also true that my blog was dominated by David Brookbank, David Elton, and Gus Olson. So
people with too much time on their hands.
Well, frequent posters, I'll put it that way. And Olson acknowledges that he's working in the Hessian campaign. But he's very sincere, I think, about the racial overtones. The second issue that came up, again, doesn't have to do with anything that appeared in the paper, at least until this morning, and that was Dave Oliveira's decision without consultation. Under our current system, he doesn't necessarily consult, and I'm not sure he's obligated to. But his posting on Sunday verbatim of a Coeur d'Alene Police Department press release on the suicide at North Idaho College, the press release naming the suicide victim. And most of us weren't even aware of it until we started getting some secondary feedback on it, some challenges about, A, why would we report this suicide, and B, why would we report the name of the individual when in general we don't do that. And it raises just a whole lot of questions. I'm not sure, you're closer to the ethical code, the new proposed code, than I am.
I've come prepared.
Okay. Carla, go for it. Speak up so people can hear what
this issue kind of really frustrates me because the brief in this morning's paper, which I think was appropriate, does not name the woman. But I want to argue that we essentially named her. DFO is us. That blog is the Spokesman-Review. And by him including her name, we did too. And you can't, in my opinion, have it both ways.
It will show up on a Google search.
And this is the blog entry in the new revised code, which hasn't formally been adopted, but let me just read it. Any full-time or part-time employee, extra board staff member, or correspondent who writes or produces a blog for spokesmanreview.com or any other digital or virtual platform should uphold the same ethical standards for accuracy, attribution, fairness, and so on as required of all journalists producing content for the print newspaper and its related print publications. Blogs produced for the website should be considered an extension of the printed brand, even as they embrace and invite more relaxed and casual discourse. And I would argue that naming this woman does not qualify as relaxed and casual discourse. I think everyone sort of understands, that our general protocol is not to name someone who commits suicide unless it's in a public forum. And I guess if I had been part of the discussion, I would have argued that a college dorm room is probably more public than a home, although you argued it was her home.
Well, the dorm room is her home. She was actually in a shared shower room, one of those big shower.
It's on the bubble.
I
think what we did in print, I can support that, but what we did in print was rendered absolutely irrelevant by what we did online.
But that distinction bothered me in print is we didn't say it was in a more public bathroom. It wasn't just her bathroom with her roommate. And that did make a distinction for me, that it was, you know, probably shared by most of the
Well, it was a public setting, and it has disrupted the college. I mean, everyone knows about it.
It involved a
traumatic.
firearm.
Yeah, see, I think there are two issues here. And to me, the more important one at this point is really this ongoing belief that blogs are somehow separate from the journalism we do at the Spokesman-Review. It is not. It
They're
is
separate.
not.
They're separate and they're not edited. That's the separation.
You know, in terms of, you know, journalism media law, our lawyers don't believe it's separate at all. That's our brand. That is our reporting out there, and we effectively named her today.
When I checked with the city desk last night, Scott had suggested no story, Scott had suggested a brief. Wasson had suggested no story. They had talked themselves into running a brief. They had already decided not to name the woman. I don't know that they were aware of the blog posting at that time.
Yeah, that's interesting. We should find out, just out of curiosity.
But so in my view, they were being consistent with policy. The incident did occur in a public university. It did involve a dorm. It had enormous visibility within the North Idaho College community. A gun was involved. All of those things relate to issues that tie to the college environment. But I supported and agreed not to name the victim. There was no need to name the victim. But at this point, I agree with you. It was made moot. If anybody Googles her name or North Idaho College suicides, that blog entry is going to come up. Our blog entries come up on Google. So the question, I think, gets to the heart of what Kevin just said offhandedly. You know, our blogs are not fundamentally edited. And I would guess that, having not talked with Dave, that he didn't give that press release a lot of thought. It was produced by the Coeur d'Alene Police Department. Christy Wood, the PIO, said that they did the press release because of the exceptional circumstances of the suicide. They don't do these press releases as a matter of routine. And DFO picks it up and puts it on his blog, as he often does with breaking news in the community. And so I don't know that he had any kind of internal policy discussion or debate. I guess the question is how do we impose, if that's the proper word, our standard in the blog world? Do we identify certain topics that are not to be posted on the blog without prior consultation? Do we require that all blog posts be edited in advance? I mean, these are hard questions.
When does a journalist ever pick up a press release and run it verbatim?
Well, that's a good question. In terms of the blog world, that actually happens kind of frequently.
Yeah, I think as
I'd argue it's not journalism.
As we migrate more and more to different platforms, you know, what we have left are the values and how we approach the journalism, and pretty soon we're not going to be able to treat them any differently anymore. It's not the blog world, it's just journalism on a different platform.
I don't disagree, but we have to at some point find a practical way to manage these things in a way that keeps the vitality of the blog but matches it to our values.
See, I think I hear that often a lot used as an excuse, protecting the vitality, therefore I need a little more latitude. You can be vital and still be accurate, fair, ethical, deliberate, and I think that rapidly that's going to become an outdated excuse, I predict, because you either have to go all the way or not. You can't have a little bit of a loophole and then treat your print differently. I think you have to just treat it all the same. It's just a different medium.
There's another issue that may or may not be involved here. It's, without Dave being here to talk to, it's hard to speculate, but Ken Sands always had a philosophy that if we get a public document in our hand, post it. I disagree with that, and I think most of us probably do, but for a long time that was just sort of our prevailing philosophy when it comes to public records. And so Dave gets a press release, it is a public document, and I'm sure that may have gone through his mind and saying, here it's in my hand. I'm not saying that's a good reason to do it. And I don't think we should post every record that we get in our hands, but...
And we don't.
We don't. No, there's a lot we don't post because they have names on them.
The distinction we make is if you've got a document and you're going to post it, you post it in its entirety, completely, because that's the honest record of history.
Yeah.
If you're going to go in and start redacting, you don't post at all.
Right.
You know, and
But that was when we were doing the Duncan trial, for instance. That was Raisler sent over boxes of stuff, and I posted every single document that was related to that case. And that's just it's two clashing philosophies. We open and we share everything with the public, and we also have to act as a gatekeeper.
We're still editors.
Yeah.
We're still
Well,
editors.
which gets to the point, how do we edit
Yeah.
the
I don't
blogs,
know.
which are 24/7. I'm posting on News as a Conversation last night at 11 o'clock. So how do we edit the blogs? What's the process
I don't
that
know.
Dave Oliveira follows? No one of us knows everything, adheres to every policy, understands every nuance. That's why we have redundant systems
Right.
that work very well in print. They don't work so well in the online world.
Yeah, you need a system, but you also need to start everyone needs to start from the same basic understanding
agree.
that there's nothing different about the journalism that we're doing. And once that's understood, then you do have to go in and build some sort of system, which we don't have.
Well, ultimately, we always decide on things based on our own judgment, even if it goes to the editor level. So I think there's a higher level of judgment that's needed, and if they're unsure as a blogger, then it needs to be asked of somebody on the desk or whatever, so that there's more than one person involved. And that's how we do it in sports, and I think that needs to be that way universally, because you can't take the bat out of people's hands by saying everything has to be edited. When we go to do something that's might be controversial or may be a policy issue in the department, then it has to go further beyond one person. I just think that's what comes down to judgment.
There's a common sense to it.
Yeah.
If you think this might be a problem, you got to consult with somebody.
There's a difference between nobody knows verbatim every single policy we have, but you should know that something like that is going to be questionable. There's no reason,
Well, as we go through the process of discussing what will eventually be the final draft of this ethics code, we may have to do some education on some general policies, how we name juvenile crime perpetrators, suicide victims, rape victims. There's some standards that we have to adhere to, even on our blogs. I agree with Carla on that.
It wouldn't be a bad idea to distill that into something that's like a card, that someone can keep on their desk and say, here you go, here's the top 10 things,
That you want to
top 10 guidelines. Don't name these people, do name these people, consult, so that everybody's got it and it's easy to find.
Well, one approach too might be that if you're writing something on a blog and it's not being screened by somebody else, ultimately then you become responsible for whether or not it adheres to our policies, and you're accountable for that. And so if there's something that's questionable, make damn sure you ask someone about it before you write it.
Well, here's I find this curious because I don't think we've ever named a suicide victim in this newsroom without having a long discussion about it. So I'm not sure how a Spokesman-Review journalist, how that message didn't get across, that we always discuss this before we name.
Well, I think, and this is not directed at Dave alone, but I think that in a lot of newsrooms there's a certain amount of mythology that is sort of grown up around online or blogs that's just, it's not true. I mean, I think people feel like there's some different kind of rules there in the interest of being more a more relaxed and casual tone, in the interest of being 24/7 and being first and being all of those things. We've sort of relaxed our standards, I think, in a lot of blogs, and I think we haven't gotten it under control because, like a lot of newsrooms, we don't have a process in place for editing. So I think, I think journalists deep down know those protocols, but we've sort of, those people who spend a lot of time online, some of them have forgotten them. And I think it's now that more newsrooms have become comfortable with the medium, blogging is not so out there anymore. It's in fact commonplace. Now is the time we should go in and institute some processes, because now we can control it. It is not controlling us anymore. It's our journalism. We can apply our standards at any time. Now's the time to get in there and do it.
But we can't edit all these blog posts.
No,
No.
you can't overreact.
Well, you could if you decided to. you could. Then you would just say, we're only gonna do as many as a week ahead. I mean, that's not true. We could, but we
I don't
choose
think
not
we
to.
want to.
No,
No,
I don't think
right.
anyone's suggesting that.
No.
To me, I think that
I was suggesting that.
you were.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was suggesting that everything that's Spokesman-Review go through an editor, just like ours.
Yeah.
The same standards of editing that journalists have always had to adhere to.
Right.
Apply if it's got the Spokesman-Review's name on it.
You
We have
could
too many
if you
blogs
choose
if we
to.
can't edit them.
Well, I mean that's I would define that as an extreme position. I think most newsrooms would.
Yeah, but see, isn't that
yeah.
interesting? But why? Because nobody would say that what we do in print is extreme.
Well, because of
It's a
the
different
volume
medium.
of it. We've got what 37 blogs as of today. That to edit
Exactly.
every single one of
Yeah.
those,
Maybe
we'd have
I'll
to
rethink
devote
and
that.
half of our
120
editing
some
resources
people devoted to print. In the
Maybe we should
newsroom.
rethink that. 37 blogs and no one's editing them. I mean, one of these days it's gonna catch us.
Well, first off, that's not true that nobody's editing. The process is a different process because it's a different medium. Our blogs are read and edited and responded to by editors all the time. You know, it's not fair to say that DFO is not editing because he's got a boss and I'm his boss, and I'm constantly providing him feedback on what he's doing on his blog, and even to the point of asking him to kill threads, ban posters, or change content. But it's a different process. The part that's different is that the post goes up prior to the editing
They're not
process.
line edited.
They're not line edited, and it's a different medium. And so I don't think it's possible, nor do I think it's desirable to try to replicate a print editing system which is tied to one paper that comes out in the morning off of a hunk of steel to this new medium. What we have to find is a system within the context of this new medium that protects us. And part of that is always going to be based on the judgment of our journalists and their willingness to exercise a certain amount of common sense caution when treading in difficult waters. And I think the issue here was, I'm going to use the term thoughtlessness. I don't mean that pejoratively to Dave. I don't think he gave it any thought. Above and beyond, he had a press release, he posted it because it was news in his community, and that's among the things that he does. And you know, we need to find a way to prevent that sort of thing from happening.
But when a journalist edits out the name of a victim like that, in a way, we are devaluing what we put out. We made the decision that you're not getting all the information, right?
That's correct.
So, if we're competing with a medium that has no qualms about it, then we are devaluing what we do
I'm not sure.
and making it more relevant. The blog has more information than we are able to do that.
In this
We
case,
are
that's
editing ourselves.
in this case, that's correct.
So, our information, our medium, is of less value because it doesn't have all the information.
That's a bit of
But
an
we're no
argument.
longer the gatekeepers, is the point.
So, Kevin.
Why would anyone buy the paper, I guess I'm saying? If you can get that information and more information somewhere else.
Well, that's a different question.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean,
that's the,
you know,
that's
Much
the.
bigger
we are
question.
stifling
Much bigger.
ourselves deliberately, you know, because we're not printing all the information. We don't print the names of suicide victims because we have ethical standards.
And we shouldn't have posted the name of this suicide victim. That was a mistake.
Well, but Kevin's making a good point. Somewhere online, you could get that information.
Absolutely.
If not DFO, you could get it somewhere
It was
else.
posted on the Coeur d'Alene Police Department website.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well,
So-
and apparently TV reported it.
And TV reported it for the same reason I think the DFO posted it. It's in a press release. You know, we don't always get press releases on suicides.
Right.
Coeur d'Alene Police Department very rarely puts out a press release. They did this time. It has a name in it. Shows up in the inbox on the fax machine or on the online email, and it went on TV. I don't think they gave it a moment's thought.
So would we have should we have changed our print policy for the paper to say
Everybody else has it. We
everybody
should.
else has it? Because that's essentially the
No, and that-
rule we're using online.
But you know what, that's not too different a scenario that already exists. I mean, a competing newspaper could have information that we don't have. One of the TV stations rarely will have information that we don't have. I mean, that's a reality that we deal with now.
But we
That
rarely-
doesn't change the way we do
But you
things
see, I
in
think
print.
we already agree that posting this name online was a mistake. So the issue isn't, you know, a different rule for online. The difference is coming up with a process that allows us to avoid that kind of mistake in the future. I wouldn't change our policy on suicide or rape victims because the information is available somewhere in that vast cyber universe. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You know, not for competitive reasons and not because you think that that may devalue our paper. Frankly, we'd have to eliminate most of our policies if we want to compete with the information that's available online, you know, from other sources.
Yeah, but if we're putting it on, if one of our products has it and the other one doesn't have it.
Don't disagree with that.
You know,
Yeah, this is
That's
one
my point.
incident, though.
That is the problem. And
That's
in
the
fact,
problem.
we published it. Like,
Right.
we
Yeah,
published it.
nobody's disagreeing with any of that, Jim. We're just trying to figure
Yeah.
out a process that allows us to maintain policy consistently across our platforms.
Yeah.
I
I'm
think
not
we
sure
do
you
have
can.
a process already, and it wasn't abided by. I mean, I think it just wasn't, it was a mistake, like you said. We have a firm process already in place, and we make mistakes. I mean, I can cite a few egregious, embarrassing ones over the years that have occurred.
Well, Allison, we have a firm process for the print product. It's a lot
Right, well,
less
Charlotte's
firm
saying that,
for
you know,
online.
all of our platforms need to abide by the same principles and ethics and everything, and so I think that we do have a process in place, and it's just for one reason or another was circumvented.
I think we need to do a much better job of educating everybody who's involved in this transitional world about the fact that we're all on a single platform. The biggest argument I've gotten into with Dave, frankly, is this question of civility online and banning posters who flame and spam and participate in vitriol and poisonous dialogue. And my argument has been, why would the Spokesman-Review create an online mechanism for people to be ridiculously, venomously personal? That doesn't do anything to further our values or our interests. All of our content ought to have its roots in our values, whether it's online or whatever platform we're going to have to deal with. So I think it's an education process that we're going to have to take on as part of this new ethics code. The ethics code does establish some standards that we've not had in writing before that relate to blogs.
Right.
And we're going to have to do some work to deal with it. I think we also constantly have to review the number of blogs we're doing, whether or not they meet a purpose and whether or not they're still vital and important.
But when you talk about the education process, are you talking about for the people that work for us, for in
Yes.
one way or another?
Yes.
Not the commenters.
The posters. Now the posters falls under that legal catch-22
We're
that
not
we've talked
liable
about
for
before.
that.
You know, we can ban a poster, we can delete a whole post, but we don't want to edit the post because then we become editors and we become liable.
Would we, this is all hypothetical, but in this case, say if a poster had named the victim.
We might very well go in and eliminate the post altogether as part of our moderating process, yeah.
And then would we say that?
What?
That this is why we eliminated that post?
Yeah, we could, we have.
Because I think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could.
To be
Yeah.
Probably
transparent
should.
about it.
Yeah.
Usually whenever a post gets killed, it's explained in
It's
some way.
explained,
The
right.
only exception is people like Marshall who are just banned outright.
Yeah.
You'd have to explain it 10 times a day.
Right.
Yeah, we got Marshall posing as Ziggles this morning. I thought that was.
Oh, is that him too?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we pull a post because it's got the name
Yeah.
of a suicide victim,
Those-
we should tell people.
Yeah,
that.
those
Yeah.
almost
Maybe it will
always
cut
generate
down on
those
the number of times
conversations.
that happens.
Yeah.
Well, I think we got to remember too. This is an isolated case too, where it's. I think you could make a case either way for naming this person, and we have some news outlets naming her, and we chose not to. But this is one of those cases where it falls, I think, outside of the strict policy. It was a very public event in a public building, and you could make a case for naming her in this case.
The case that comes most to comparability is that young
Lakeside kid.
boy who killed himself in front of the school.
Yeah.
You know, somewhat more public environment, but similar situation. Young person, gun on campus. Suicide wasn't related to the school. You know, he just happened to do it there. We took a lot of heat on that. But you're right, it's a judgment call.
Yeah.
This, you could have argued this naming of the paper.
I think that even though you could certainly make a case, I agree with you that you could make a case one way or the other. I think the thing that didn't happen, that absolutely has to happen, is like Dan said, we would at least have some level of discussion
Yeah.
about this. That is point number one.
Yeah, I'm not saying that invalidates the concerns about the inconsistency. That's not what I'm
And now
saying
we
at all.
kind of
But
look
as far
stupid,
as
frankly.
you
Oh, I don't know that we look stupid. I think we look caught in a conundrum that is common to our industry right now. And the only thing that makes us look stupid, if that is at all possible in this, is that we talk about it. Now, in most places, this conversation would never occur. And if it were dealt with, it would be dealt with. I'd call Olivera and say, "Don't ever do that again, you son of a bitch," and we'd move on. We open ourselves up to second guessing and criticism and looking stupid because we talk about it.
Well, maybe, but I think we kind of look like the right hand doesn't know what the left is doing. If you're a discerning news consumer, and more of them are these days, you'll wonder why we don't have it in print and why we have it online, and wonder who the heck is paying attention.
I think we've answered that question this morning.
I wonder, as you guys have, talked to other newspaper editors in your travels, if other newspapers edit their blogs, because
there are papers that do.
I know that. I think the PI does, because I talked to Todd Bishop, who does the.
More and more newsrooms are developing online copy desks.
Oh, really?
But part of the pushback on that is that it slows down the immediacy of the web, the whole reason that it exists. That whole instantaneous interaction thing. But a lot of papers are taking the extra 5 minutes, or however long.
Part of the appeal of Huckleberries too is a lot of the people who use it see it as not being institutional, even though it clearly is. But if they knew that there was, the unnamed heavy-handed editor standing over to Olivera checking everything he posts, I don't think you would have the readership. And one of the most important things that blog functions is it's an outreach to parts of the community who otherwise would not trust us as a news source. It's a doorway for them to get into our coverage. So I think I understand the argument for editing blog posts, but you could also do a lot of damage that way.
Yeah, I'm not arguing in favor of editing blog posts. I'm just wondering what the industry.
You see all sorts of systems out there. I wouldn't want to try to replicate a print editing structure for online, whether it's blogs or anything else. I think it has to look differently, but we got a lot of work to do to get some of this stuff out. And it's all going to change, because whatever we're doing today is going to change tomorrow with new technology or new approaches or new personalities who are blogging. I don't think we'd have this issue with the Falls, because Sean's been an assistant city editor, he's been a veteran reporter. He's worked more closely with these issues than Dave, who's been an associate editor writing editorials. Hasn't been attached to the news operation for some time.
Yeah, with all due respect, I think you're giving it too much of a pass. Because that goes back to Dan's point. I mean, you know what? We're journalists, and there's a certain amount of DNA I think that we all have or should have, need to have, and the rest of it is an excuse.
Well, I don't mean to be making excuses. I think it was a mistake.